All right, we are live. Looks like everyone is coming in. Gonna give everybody a second just to log on and get settled. Welcome everybody. We're gonna start in just a second. Thank you so much for your patience. We're gonna start in just a second, just letting everyone settle in. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
I'm going to move to a new location while everybody's joining. Maybe a little brighter location. Is that any better?
Oh, that's perfect.
Okay.
And it looks like, I think everybody is logged in. Welcome, everyone. Good evening. Thank you so much for spending your lovely evening with us, Midtown Reader and Sarah Frey. We are so excited for this wonderful event. My name is Daryl Ellis. I manage Midtown Reader, an independent bookstore here in Tallahassee, Florida, which I'm sure all of you already know and love. Tonight, we are so excited to welcome Sarah Frey, author of The Growing Season, How I Built a New Life and Saved an American Farm. Sarah is going to be in conversation with Paul Bradshaw, who is here with us this evening to ask some really intriguing and wonderful questions and to spark some really great conversation about probably farming and all kinds of awesome other stuff too. I'm going to let Sarah tell you some more about this book in just a minute. But first, I wanted to let everyone know that you can submit a question by using the little Q&A button down at the bottom of your screen. You can submit a question anytime during the event. We're going to leave a couple minutes at the end to kind of answer all your questions. So definitely at any time, if anything piques your interest, just type in a little question down there and we'll get to it at the end. I also want to let you know that you can support local book selling and Sarah Frey by buying her awesome book, which you're definitely going to want to do by the end of this presentation, by going to midtownreader.com, by calling Midtown Reader at 850-425. Oh my God, I just forgot our phone number. That is very embarrassing. There it goes. Oh, well, you'll have to go on our website to find it. I'm so sorry. Or you can just go to our store, which is what I recommend if you are comfortable doing so. We're open for browsing Tuesday through Saturday from 10 to 6 or on Sundays from 10 to 4. And we have private browsing available on Monday as well. So a little bit about tonight's author, Sarah Frey. Sarah has been described by the New York Times as the pumpkin queen of America. She sells more pumpkins than any other producer in the entire United States. Her family business, Frey Farms, plants thousands of acres of fruits and vegetables in Florida, Georgia, Missouri, Arkansas, Illinois, Indiana, and West Virginia. With a mission to end food waste and the fresh produce industry, the family makes natural food products and beverages from imperfect or ugly fruit. Inspired by her humble beginnings and early life on the farm, she continues to create opportunities for those living and working in rural communities. Frey lives in Southern Illinois and is raising her two sons, William and Luke, on the same family farm where she grew up, which is so awesome. She is joined by Paul Bradshaw, who founded the Southern Group in 1999 after a lengthy career as a policymaker and an administrative lawyer. Paul has dealt with a broad range of major public policy initiatives, including those directed at development, environmental protection, and public education. Paul's work on his grandparents' farm while growing up led to a love of agriculture and the creation of his very own family farm. That farm, Greenfire Farms in Havana, has grown to become the largest living gene bank of rare chicken breeds in the entire world. So I'm going to pass the torch over to Paul. Thank you guys so much. I'm so excited to hear this awesome conversation.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Paul.
Sarah. Hey, how are you? Hey, Sarah, how are you?
Hey, Paul. Good to see you. How are you doing?
Still late in the process. So, anyway, I think we can kind of keep it informal. I appreciate Midtown Reader giving me the opportunity to ask Sarah questions tonight. She has a fascinating book. Like Daryl, I'll shill for the growing season. I sort of went there for the agricultural stories and ended up staying for the raw human drama. I mean, Sarah has a background that is kind of a combination of, Tom Sawyer and Lord of the Flies. She grew up on, and I guess still lives on, this hard scrabble farm in Southern Illinois, and really had a remarkable childhood. I mean, and over half the book really talks about her formative years as a child. And I would like her to talk about it, but know that when I say it was different, it was like reading a memoir of somebody who grew up in the Great Depression in the 1920s on a farm. I mean, she lived in a house that was freezing in the winter with no running water, and lived for a decent portion of her childhood, on camps and free school lunches. I mean, so when we talk about coming from humble beginnings, they were extraordinarily humble, and from that she has built this agricultural empire around the United States. But why don't you tell us some about your childhood, because it was fascinating.
Well, I grew up on a small family farm, Paul, in Southern Illinois, and it was an 80-acre farm. I had 4 older brothers. I'm the youngest of my parents' 21 combined children. That's from their various marriages. And then I am the youngest. But by and large, my 4 older brothers, John, Ted, Harley, and Leonard, were the biggest part of my life growing up. And not only were they my brothers, my siblings, but they were actually my friends too. So because we grew up in this very isolated rural part of Southern Illinois, we were forced to, be friends with each other. So when I was little, I really didn't see a difference between myself, the youngest, and the girl and the boys. So I wanted to go do everything that they were doing, whether it was hunting or fishing or, driving tractors or equipment or the different jobs that they did on the farm. I tried to traipse off, after them when I was really small as often as, I could. So, it was like not a lot of fun being the only girl, and none of those boys ever wanted to play with dolls. So I kind of had to, get outside and ultimately chase my brothers around. And in the process of doing that, I learned, so much. And my brothers really invested a lot of time in me as well when I was a little girl, to build my confidence, to be able to do a lot of the things that they were doing that I wasn't yet old enough to do. And that, typically girls didn't usually do those kinds of things. So there were some really incredible memories from my childhood, as well as some very difficult ones that I share in the book. But outside of where sort of the isolated bubble that I was raised in, I remember at a very early age figuring out for the first time that how we were living was very different than how the rest of the world lived. And that's when I saw a thermostat for the first time. And I recognized that as a device that made the house get warm, because we didn't have we cut wood in the winters, and that's, was entirely our heat source. And when I was really small, like 4 or 5 years old, I really old enough to walk. If you were old enough to walk, you were old enough to carry wood. And so that was one of my jobs that I had when I was a little girl. And when I recognized that there was this device that ultimately could control the temperature, I thought to myself, why wouldn't we just get one of these? Why wouldn't we just get one of these little thermostats and hang it on the wall? It's like a little magic box. So the growing season is full of a lot of really interesting stories, like you mentioned, Paul, about my formative years. Because for me, I felt like it was very important in the book to answer the question that so many people have had in my life, and that was, wait, how old are you? You did what? Wait, you're 25, or oh, you're 20, you're only 27, 28, 29, 30, on to my current age now. And people wondered, how did you do that at such an early age? So I spent a lot of time in reflection about that question, which was why I shared so many stories from the farm and how I grew up in those really early years in the book.
So if you could go back and had the magical ability to change your life, would you have changed it, or
Nothing. No, I think that, obviously there are some things in the book that, yes, you wish would have, maybe wouldn't have happened. But ultimately, I feel like every experience that I went through, good or bad or indifferent, ultimately shaped me into the person that I am today. And even some of those really sort of traumatic experiences, I recognize now in my adult life that it's given me perspective on a lot of things. It's made me more aware in a lot of ways. And ultimately, even some of the hardest things that I had to go through really are credited to giving me the grit that I needed to take a chance at an early age, to take a stand at an early age, to ultimately feel like maybe the worst thing in the world had already happened to me. So what did I have to be afraid of? And for me, it's been really a mindset of choosing also to see the good, not to say that, not to discount anything that bad that happens in our lives, but ultimately I feel like if we learn from them and we grow from them, it's up to us to choose what we focus on, and ultimately how we apply learnings and lessons to our life and grow in the future. So there's really not a lot I would change, Paul.
So talk about what you ate growing up.
Well, we primarily lived off of land. So when I say that my brothers went hunting, like that was like we hunted or we harvested or we gathered most of the food that we ate, which was really interesting because that's how we grew up. We were so poor, but how we grew up, ultimately, that lifestyle now is coveted. So if you think of, all of the meat that we ate, it was, it was antibiotic free. It was free range. It was wild for the most part. And then, the truck patch garden that we grew, which I don't know who's logged in now watching the Facebook Live, but a truck patch is like a great big garden on steroids. So it's not like fields and fields of produce that we grow now, but it's larger than, the average size family garden. And so we spent a lot of time as kids working in the truck patch. And then also, everything is seasonal in life and in food. And we spent a lot of time gathering berries and, harvesting sweet corn. And ultimately, we lived off of the land. Everything that we ate was clean, simple, and delicious.
Yeah. So does a turtle really have 7 different kind of meats on it?
Except for the turtle. The turtle was not delicious. It's really funny. I saw a snapping turtle the other day cross the road, and it was really big, almost as big as the one that I had to pick up when I was a little girl and throw in the back of that pickup truck. And it was actually crossing the highway, and I had to stop and marvel at it. I was like, oh my gosh, this thing was huge. But yeah, I mean, so examples of things that we would eat, like a turtle. I mean, we would eat catfish, from fish from the pond. My brothers would go frog gigging. I always held the light. I was never really into like gigging a frog. So we'd have frog legs, and then, we ate a lot of deer meat, a lot of rabbit, a lot of quail. And ultimately, that's, I don't order those things now when I go to really nice restaurants. They're like, oh, we have venison on the menu tonight. I'm like, no, I'll pass.
Yeah. So talk about your dad. I mean, your dad, there's actually, I mean, he is such a complex character, and obviously he's a real person, but I mean, there's a trilogy just in, your dad's life and how you related to him. I mean, it's like watching, a Hollywood movie, listen to describe him. So tell us some about your dad, sort of starting with maybe how he faked his own death, and then moving forward from that.
Yeah. Well, there's an entire book just that could and probably should at some point be written, either just about him or a movie or a television series based on his life, because he was certainly quite a character. He was a serial entrepreneur. He was a very hard worker, but he was. You talked about the way I grew up. Reminding you of someone who might have grown up in the Great Depression. Well, that's how I grew up, because he was born during the Great Depression, and, his family did lose, so much of what they had. And he remembered, being without so many things, which is why I think he made this, conscious decision ultimately to isolate us sort of where we were on that farm and live. It's kind of complicated, because in that sense, we lived, isolated and off the land, and nothing went to waste. And I think so much of that ultimately was because of his childhood, and having seen his parents and grandparents lose things during that time in his life and childhood, but then ultimately creating a certain amount of wealth, but then deciding that there was a different kind of life for him. So he was really interesting in so many ways. Very, very complicated character, very, very almost hard to describe. He had a lot of charm and charisma. He was obviously a very imperfect man. He was married previously, and he bought into the Dixie Feed franchise, and that's where he had met my mother. And she was the wife of one of my father's employees. And then they, ran off to Tennessee together, and the rest is kind of history. And she had 2 children. He had, 13 children who are much older than me, who were nearly, I think most of them were either, in their late teens or had grown up by the time I was born. But he was a very fascinating, imperfect, human being that ultimately I learned so much from.
Did writing the book, was there anything that you needed to resolve about his memory that the book helped resolve, or had it already been resolved by the time you read the book?
I felt like I had resolved everything when he passed away. I felt like I was really glad that we were so close when I was little. Like we were so bonded, and then we kind of almost became rivals at one point, and there was sort of this power struggle, and I wasn't the one that he would have probably really expected to do that. I was the youngest. I was the girl. I was the one that he invested his, all of his, so much of his time and attention to. And I was basically his chief of staff, and extraordinarily loyal to my father. And we were very close. So I don't think, by the point in his life when I was growing up and when I could sort of see what was happening in the family and with the farm and all of it. I don't think he expected that I would challenge him in that way. But even after that happened, it was like once I made my decision, it was almost like there was no animosity. There was, I know that he felt very sort of defeated. And I don't think that he had really toward the end, I don't think that it was necessarily an issue of his daughter taking over the farm and taking charge of the family. I think it was more for him a reflection on his life, and ultimately, feeling like he probably himself should have done things a lot differently.
Yeah. So why don't you, and this is a big leap to make, but so tell us about going from, feral child to vegetable and fruit magnate. I mean, tell us how you got started in that and kind of how the arc went from those humble beginnings.
Yeah. So when I was a little girl, my mother, who was a very, very hard worker, ultimately she had started a summer produce delivery route. And when I was little, I would join her on that produce delivery route. And she would send me into grocery stores to go talk to produce managers to take their orders. And she would buy melons from farms in southern Indiana and then deliver the melons. And for me, getting to go with her got me off of the farm. So it was never really my intention to stay on the farm. Everything that I did my entire life up until making the decision that I would purchase the farm was moving me closer to getting me away from the farm and off of the farm. So when I saw her leaving, I would chase her down the road like, Mom, don't leave. I want to go. I would jump in the truck with her. And I loved that time that we had together in the summers, because I was able to get out and see people and socialize and eat regular food. And it was almost like normal, getting to see what normal looked like and getting to be around other humans. That was a big deal for me as a little girl. And I also started to realize that I was very good at selling things when I was young. And I think that ultimately built my confidence, having to, be an 8-year-old child and then ultimately have to go talk to grown men, 30, 40-year-old men who are managing grocery stores. And it also, I think one of those, so much of those experiences really shaped my ability to sort of shrug off. If you think about females in agriculture and what I was doing and what I was building, so much of when I was working on the book, a lot of people asked, about the, interactions with men and working in a very male dominated industry, and, what some of those sort of, what would be examples of some stories or things that happened to me. But ultimately, I didn't really pay attention to a lot of that, because it goes back to when I was 8 years old, I had to talk to 30, 40-year-old men and do business with them. And then, for the most part, they were so shocked at first when they saw this tiny human communicating with them to take a sales order, that, I was always treated well. But there were also times too, when I was a little girl, with all of this confidence that I was building, and I would go do a sale, and occasionally I would be, dismissed, like, wait, where's your mom? Where's your dad? Where are your parents? So as I got older and in the real world and in the business world, if that ever happened, I didn't really get my feelings hurt easily. You know what I mean? If somebody was like, oh, well, she just has a small business, or she's just starting out, or, she doesn't have the right equipment, or blah, blah, blah. Like, none of that ever got in my head, because I was sort of used to just plugging along and charging ahead from the time I was a little girl, and because I didn't have a choice.
So what were some of inflection points in business where you went from, the back of a pickup truck to a semi truck to a fleet of semi trucks to, your global fruit and vegetable empire. What occurred at those points that allowed you to do that?
There were so many different, there were like many milestones along the way. When I went from the first truck from a borrowed truck to owning my own truck, and then buying a nicer truck, and then a nicer, you know what I mean? And so there was this progress along the way. And then at some point when you make that transition from super scrappy entrepreneur to, oh no, now I have to up my game and really do things right and professionalize this business and play by all of the rules. I think of that old saying, when you have nothing to lose. And then once you start to build something and you have something to lose, then you sort of become more concerned about, okay, how do I protect this, and how do I grow this, and how do I limit, myself from liabilities, and okay, well, when I was 16 years old, I could afford to drive on bald tires, and I wouldn't pay the money to change them until they blew out along the interstate. When you're running semis down the road, it's kind of like, okay, we can't have tires blowing out on semi trailers. That's a dangerous thing, not a good thing. So we need to invest in the equipment. So I think that, ultimately, as I grew and as I, started to feel like I had really built something and maybe had something to lose, that's when it was like, okay, we have a strong foundation. Now let's bring the right people in to help us grow this. And I was never the person. I knew that I didn't know it all. I knew that ultimately at the end of the day, I really was just a really scrappy hard worker. And then I would have to bring in people who had skill sets outside of my own. And I was fortunate to have good people hiring decision skills, and surrounded myself with a lot of people that were, ultimately came to join my family. Not that they even came to work for me. Like so many people that ultimately helped me in the early years, who are still with the company today are feel like very much like a part of our family business still. Fry Farm still feels and is a family business.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just, I got to tell you, reading your book, you can read it as sort of this compelling human drama, but it also reads like, a Harvard Business Journal case study, right? And how somebody, and I guess Harvard has actually used you as a case study for when you negotiated with Walmart. And 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 I love your book because it delivers, no pun intended, a lot of different silos. And it's just fascinating, and I would, commend to anything. So where does the arc go from here? Well, I feel like we're particularly lucky in catching, the Pumpkin Queen of America on Halloween week. So I'm curious, how many pumpkins will you move in 2020 total?
Oh my gosh, millions. Something really bad actually happened this season. We got hit with a really terrible freeze in the Midwest. We had several frosts staggered out throughout the harvest season. And then a little over a week and a half ago, we got a really, really bad freeze where it got down into the mid-20s for an extended period of time. So we watched really the last portion of our pumpkin crop melt. Now, the good thing is there was such a demand early for pumpkins this year that we moved so much volume out sooner before, so much of that volume got front loaded before we had the freeze. So things are, things are pretty well, it's Halloween week, but things are pretty well wrapped up on the farm. We're still harvesting winter squash and things like that, doing packing, grading, and sorting in the facilities, and obviously still making our juice products. And we're still making watermelon juice and also the Sarah's homegrown beverages for Publix. And it's been one heck of a year with, I mean, for everyone. Like, the whole world. It's been a heck of a year for the entire world, but especially in agriculture.
So where do you think you go from here? I mean, you've now got value add products, like your
Yeah.
juice and things like that. Do you think you continue to grow stuff like that?
So I would like to personally just focus on creating more consumer packaged goods under the Sarah's Homegrown brand, expand our beverage division, and then ultimately on the farm, we're always trying to find ways to, incorporate more of the things that we grow into value added products. So I think that for us, our future will be in value add, and we'll continue to diversify. We'll continue to focus on sustainability. And, ultimately when you're using products like the ugly fruit that you grow on your farm, you're not only doing the right thing for the farm from a profitability standpoint by utilizing more of what you grow, you're doing the right thing for the consumer, because now you're able to create clean, healthy ingredients. And then you're also doing the right thing for the planet from a environmental and a sustainability standpoint. So there's so much more work to be done, I think, in not just inside of our own business, not in the industry. I think in the fresh produce industry, I think the opportunity is limitless. And I think that you'll see more farms getting into, diversifying their offerings, and then ultimately figuring out how they use more of, the ugly fruit. And I know that for us, we're going to continue to focus on that and ultimately maximize all of the work and all of the efforts that we put into growing these crops and feeding people every year.
Well, I've loved talking to you. It's a great book. You're remarkable.
Thanks so much, Paul. Thank you.
We have
Thank you
a
guys so
bunch
much.
of questions.
Oh,
They've been coming in. Do you mind describing and kind of explaining what you mean when you use the term ugly fruit and kind of what that means to
Sure.
your industry?
Sure. So it's visually imperfect fruit. Much of what we grow is for grocery retail, and so most consumers want their fruit to be really pretty, and not everything we grow is really pretty. So there's a lot of fruit that's left over at the throughout the harvest, and a lot of times at the end of the harvest that is imperfect, visually imperfect, but it's still, all of the nutritional integrity is there, and the taste is there, and the flavor is there. But it might not look perfect on the outside. So instead of tilling that fruit back into the earth or wasting it, we ultimately take it, and like in the case of the watermelons, we make Sama watermelon juice by using the imperfect watermelons. So they could be like sun-kissed watermelons that have a little sun bleaching on the top of them, but still a perfectly good, delicious watermelon. We'll take that watermelon, we'll cut it, and we'll make Sama out of it. Or in the case of, Sarah's Homegrown, we also have a line called Sarah's Homegrown that, probably a lot of the readers and people that support your store probably shop at Publix as well. And Publix carries our Sarah's Homegrown agua frescas. There's like a little picture of my face on the bottle, but that we use a lot of the ingredients that go into our fresh agua frescas come from products that were originally imperfect fruit, or otherwise known as ugly fruit, that we put back into the beverages.
That is so awesome. So other than the watermelon, what other types of juices do you make?
So there's so that we actually have three different Fresca flavors, and then we have some lemonades as well. But the primary ones are the strawberry. There's a strawberry lemon. There's a mango, really delicious mango agua fresca, and there's the watermelon cucumber agua fresca. But probably the healthiest. Now, those are real. I'm not saying they're not healthy, because they are.
Those sound delicious.
They're really good. They're only 60 calories for a great big bottle.
Wow.
And they're made, I mean, there's no artificial colors, flavors, preservatives, and they're absolutely delicious. But the Sama watermelon juice is 100% juice product. And that is just like, it's like drinking a watermelon. And watermelon is so good for you. And it has so many really incredible health benefits. And with everybody now, thinking about how to boost your immune system, how to stay healthy, how to stay hydrated, the watermelon juice is really, I mean, this year, especially because of the pandemic, we've really seen that the sales really increase, and more people are aware that they can buy and drink watermelon juice, and also what the benefits of drinking watermelon juice is.
One of our listeners says, you are such a strong person. What drives your inspiration the most?
I'm not always strong. I think, like everybody else, I think we all have courage inside of us, and but sometimes we have to work a little harder to find the courage. It's there. You have to kind of dig for it. So sometimes, I have to work hard to find my courage, especially if it's something that, is particularly, scary to me or new or challenging. But what drives the inspiration? I like to build things. I like to create things. I like to figure out how to do things better, faster, and stronger, or whatever it may be. And I ultimately, at this stage in my life, I'm getting so much satisfaction from watching my children and my nieces and nephews engage in the family business. And I look at them and I see my brothers and I see myself and my nieces every day. And they're all working inside the business, especially this year when they all went to e-learning. They were home on the farm every single day. They started a fresh produce drive-through. Thousands of cars showed up in the middle of nowhere. People showed up from hundreds of miles away to come support these kids and go to their fresh produce drive-through. And I see them out there, and they have their mask on, their lab coats and their goggles, and they're having this COVID-friendly drive-through, and they're throwing just crates of sweet corn in the back of people's cars, and watermelons and cantaloupes and everything that we grow. And, they're like selling direct to consumers bulk fresh produce during, this started, they started doing this in Easter. And, I see them working and figuring it out, and then like going on social media and then growing that business that they started. And they're really what they inspire me now, and I'm actually learning from them, which is really, it's really incredible. But I am getting so much joy and satisfaction of seeing them sort of, go through some of the same trials and tribulations and ask a lot of the same questions that I asked when I was 15 years old and, trying to figure it out. The difference is I'm sort of on the other side of so much of that. So I get the fun part of being a mentor to them, and not always just telling them what the answer is, just maybe asking them questions and letting them sort of figure things out on their own. But to see that drive and determination and the grit that they have in action is very rewarding to me. And to also know that I've raised really good, selfless human beings who, want to support their family and their community. That's the inspiration. That's what I'm enjoying right now.
Oh, that's so awesome. And it segues really perfectly to our next question. In your book, you talk a lot about your journey of leaving the farm and coming back to the farm. And you learned a lot of lessons along the way. And what is one lesson that you really hope that your kids kind of leave with
Oh,
when they leave the
that
farm?
that ultimately, and I don't have an expectation for really any of the kids as far as who's going to stay, who's going to take over. I want them all actually to go out into the world and have these great big experiences and then want to come back. But the one thing that I hope that they never lose sight of is something that, is what has ultimately built the foundation for a successful family, for a successful business, and that is family, the family bonds. And I want the kids to put the same amount of value on that. And I think they will. They're growing up. I have two boys, but they're growing up with their cousins who are just as close as siblings. So just as close as my brothers and I really were growing up. And they, they're all sort of, I look at them and it like in their big group and they're all working together and I see, family, and I see the ultimately, these young people working together, all pulling in the same direction for a common cause. And I think they recognize that too. So I think that after they go out into the world and figure out, who ultimately they want to be and where they want to go, I think my hope is that they'll just always put their family first.
That's so lovely. That's awesome. What is your current relationship and kind of what role are your brothers playing right now with the family farm?
So we all work together. Everybody has a different role. We're all 2 years apart. So I'm the youngest, and then it goes Ted, and John, Harley, and Leonard. And we all have different roles. So John, I work in sort of oversee sort of more of the strategic sort of vision for the company now. And I still love, I still love to sell things. So I still get involved in sales. Not because we don't have an excellent sales team, because we do, we have the best. But I still like to do that. And so I spend some of my time doing that. And then, I have a couple of my brothers, John and Leonard. Ultimately, they like being outside. They like being with or not John, I'm sorry, Leonard and Ted. They like, being out there more hands-on with the crops and in the fields. And Harley's more of a, an operations or logistics guy. But ultimately John Frey is really the one who's like in there in the office every single day, like eye on the business. And so we all have, sort of our own strengths. And it's not like I ever really had to sit down and map it out and say, okay, now you go do this and you're going to do this and here's your role. Like everyone just sort of fell into their natural role. And because and we were also used to working together because of how we were raised and where we were raised, working together every day as kids. So it was very natural. And it was almost like everybody just sort of seemed to know what they were going to do.
So let's pivot a little bit and talk a little bit about the process of writing and publishing your book. What kind of was your first inspiration that you wanted to tell this story kind of in this format?
That's a good question. I thought about writing a cookbook. Actually, that's where I started. And there were different moments throughout the process of writing the growing season where I asked myself why I didn't just write a cookbook instead, especially when it got really difficult. Like I said, I felt like taking it back to, and spending more time on, my childhood and how I grew up, where I grew up and all of that ultimately would be answer sort of a lot of questions about who I was and how I was able to do the things that I had done. And I felt like it was also very important to share with the world the value of those family bonds and the strength in bonds. And, you know, that really was the reason that I chose that, this particular, format to write within. So yeah, that pretty much sums it up.
What time of day do you write?
I do my best writing early in the morning as soon as I wake up. And then once I get it out of my head, and then I usually don't want to come back to it until late in the afternoon.
What was your process in trying to find a publisher? Was it an easy process for you? Was it a little bit longer?
Yeah, actually it was, because I had a lot of really fantastic help. I had a really great agent named Molly Glick. She was with CAA, and they represented me, and ultimately I didn't have to put a whole lot of thought into any of that, because Molly was amazing, and she lined up all of the meetings and then just said, okay, you pick, So I was very happy that I got to work with the team at Random House. After interviewing several publishers for the story, I was most impressed by their team and their enthusiasm for the project. My editor, Susanna Porter, who is just really amazing. I chose them because of, just how magnificent they are. They're just pros.
What advice would you give entrepreneurs that are looking to bring family into their business?
Can you repeat that question?
What advice would you give entrepreneurs who are looking to bring family kind of into their business?
Well, what advice? So I'll narrow it. I'll bring in that question a little bit. So an entrepreneur, like someone who owns a company, and maybe your kids are thinking about joining. So this is kind of something I'm going through right now. I'm going to make them all go away at first. Like, they don't just get to, hey, I'm out of school now, I'm going to join the company. No, you don't. You have to go put a few years in in another business or something else that interests you, learn something new, and then there will be a time for you to come back. So I personally think that is important. And then when and if that decision gets made that they want to come back and join the family business, it's because they really want to do that. You know what I mean? And there'll never really be a doubt. Well, I didn't never really do anything else. And, I just went into this family business, but maybe I could have been at XYZ. So for me, and having started the company, I ultimately, it would bring my heart so much joy to see all of these kids, taking it over and growing it to levels that I never even dreamed of. But I want them to go do other things before they make that transition.
Well, thank you so much, Sarah.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.
It's been such an awesome conversation. So everyone, you have homework. You're going to go to Publix and you're going to get that awesome watermelon juice. And then you're going to stop by Midtown Reader and you're going to pick up Sarah's book, The Growing Season. And it's like a perfect picnic evening. You're going to have a great book and a great drink, and it'll be refreshing.
Yes. And it's still, it's still like really hot in Florida. So, this is like the perfect time to be drinking watermelon juice and the agua frescas. They're delicious.
Thank you so much, Paul, also for joining us. This was a wonderful evening. Thank you for spending your time with us. And everyone, have a happy reading and happy evening. Thank you so much.
Right. Bye, everyone.